How diddly do everyone in YouTube land? It's your boy Tickle the Beagle back again with another Magic the Gathering deck tech. And hot off the heels of my last deck tech, Mono Blue Commander called Arcane the Omnipotent. Go check that out, by the way. It was a great video. Great deck in my opinion. Spoiler alert, better than this one for reasons I'll get into in a second. I decided I wanted to do another expensive Mono Blue Commander. So due to that whole budget restriction that I put myself on, at least under $100 is usually the budget, the decks are good, but not, you wouldn't expect them to be good. And we're going even lower budget. I challenged myself to get as close to $60 as humanly possible. And this deck is $60.09 exactly. I was almost there. However, I think it's close enough to where I'm pretty happy with the price. That's not including basic lands, of course, because basic lands are really easy to come by. I still think it's bullshit that the price of basic lands isn't shown when you're making a deck. I think that's really dumb, but hey, you know what? Just don't worry about the price, I guess. It's a whole messy thing. Anyways, without rambling on too long, as you can see in front of us, the deck we're building is called Patron of the Moon. Legendary creature spirit, costs 5, 6, 7 mana, 5 colorless, 2 blue. I put up no fingers for 5. And he's a 5/4, so automatically it's like really bad stats, but blue isn't known for their stats, especially their commanders. You can see that in Arcane the Omnipotent. He has horrible stats, but built the right way, he allows you to draw your entire deck, so it doesn't matter what his stats are. Now, let's get into his stuff. First of all, he has Moonfolk Offering, meaning that his price isn't as bad. For those who don't know how the offering mechanic works, basically, you sacrifice, I was about to say tribute, Yu-Gi-Oh! Mind. You have to sacrifice a creature who is the same type as the offering wants. So, let's say it said Merfolk instead of Moonfolk. Let's say it was a Merfolk offering. Then you would have to sacrifice a Merfolk, and then you, instead of playing it, and the amount, and you still have to pay a cost, but it's discounted by the amount that that creature cost, including its color, mana cost. So let's say we have a Moonfolk on the field that costs 3 and 1 blue. That means that we could sacrifice it, and this guy only costs 2 and 1 blue to play, because one of his blue got discounted, as well as 3 of his colorless. So it allows you to play an expensive Moonfolk on one turn, and then him on the next turn for much, much cheaper, kind of making it so that you've got ramp as long as you play expensive Moonfolk. Most of the Moonfolk suck, I should mention. I'm pretty sure all the Moonfolk were made before we discovered plastic. That's exaggeration, but you get it. They're very old, so they're very bad. So that's to get him out cheaper. What does he do? He flies. So this is a Voltron deck. No, of course it's not. The flying doesn't really matter. We might hit with him sometimes. It's useful, I guess. His real ability we're worried about is pay 1 generic, put 2 land cards from your hand into play tapped. Not 2 basic lands, any lands. So there's a couple ways we could have taken this. First of all, we could play a deck that focuses on getting rid of your lands or requiring you to get rid of lands for effects, and then shoo-biddy-boo-bah, it's no problem because we play this. We could play a deck that's focused on drawing a bunch and then putting you back down the hand size by making this guy put a bunch of lands into play. We could play Landfall. Unfortunately, blue Landfall is really expensive, but it is the best way to play this deck. There is a bunch of cards that in Landfall that are blue that are insane. Like, there's literally a Landfall card in blue, I forget its name. I think it's like Roiling Giant or whatever, where, hey, when you play a land, just take control of a creature. Until end of turn? Nope. Until that fucking giant is gone, you just keep it. It's yours. Have it. However, that card's also $8, so trying to keep it to 60 wasn't really gonna work, especially with all the other cards we have in here. Even though they're cheap, bumping up the price a lot. Remember, 100 cards, even if they're all cheap, will still be a little expensive and pricey. But what I went for is a deck that focuses on lands with enters the battlefield triggers, as well as cards that care about returning lands to your hand for effects, such as there's literally a counter spell that's like counter target spell. You don't have to pay this card's mana cost if you return 3 lands from your battlefield to your hand. So it allows you to make that literally trivial, because you just put 2 lands for 1 mana and it costs like 4. There's also cards that are like draw 2 cards, or I think it's draw 3 cards, then discard 2, unless you discard a land card, which is like pretty good. But mainly we focused on enters battlefield triggers, and cards that return lands to our hand, which just so happen to be Moonfolk. A lot of Moonfolk cards specialize in returning lands to your hand, and then after that you can return them with this guy and then use those effects over and over and over again. Some of them aren't that good, but one of them literally says, like, pay 2, return a land to your hand, draw 1, discard 1, Patron of the Moon, put it back, draw 1, discard 1. It's really good. It's really good. It allows you to sift through your deck for specific lands that you would need, like certain enters the battlefield lands, like as we'll get to. There's a land that says when this card enters the battlefield, deal 1 damage to your opponent. It's not our main win condition, but it is a good win condition. Now, let's actually get into the deck, though. Now, there are a lot of categories here that we'll go over, but I do want to talk about another theme I added into this deck besides the lands, which is big men. The idea behind it is the fact that you're putting so much goddamn land on the board, and I put a lot of draw into this deck because I kept having a problem in testing where I would literally never get lands, like at all, and it was a problem. You're in the wrong category, my friend. But as I was saying, it was a huge problem to where I would never get the lands I was looking for. I would never get lands at all a lot of the time, so I needed to put a ton of draw, which just so happens to help with the fact that you want to put a ton of land on and then draw out your big boys, and we'll get into those in a second. They're just big, beefy guys that can either hit a bunch or help out your strategy, like this guy right here. We'll get into him in a second. If you do want just the full deck list, it's down in the description. I am not going to just go over each card individually because that would take too fucking long, and I want to make this video 30 minutes or less, not 30 minutes or more. So we're going to go over them quickly and glance over most of them. Let's go over each individual piece now. Starting off, we have big men. Also, I should keep in mind that when upgrading this deck, because I know you'll want to upgrade it if you do like it, and please, if you do like it, go tell me in the comments what you like about it and what you don't like about it, of course, so I can get better at deck building. But also, Jesus Christ, fucking can barely breathe, I'm speaking so fast. I want you to note what I have lined out here, and when you're upgrading the deck, try to focus on one specific element rather than upgrading all the different elements. I would for this because it was the cheapest way to do it, is to build it a bunch of different ways. Whereas normally you just want to focus on this is landfall only, or this is bouncing lands to activate their ETBs again only. That's basically how you usually want to build it. With that disclaimer out the way, let's go over, first of all, draw. I figured I'd just get draw out the way. There's a lot of different draw spells in here. The only interesting ones include Barrin of Tolarian Archmage, or Barrin Tolarian Archmage. Why did I say of the? You get what I'm saying. He has the effect that when he comes to the battlefield, you can bounce something, which is pretty useful actually. Just selective removal, but that's not the main reason we play him. The main reason we play him is at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put from your hand onto the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Not for each one, mind you, but you do get to draw a card at the end of the turn, which is great. You're drawing 2 cards per turn just with him on board, which is really good in a deck that struggles with drawing. As long as you have Patron of the Moon, he'll always be online. There are other cards also that do this, but it's mostly Patron of the Moon. A lot of this was just 3 mana spells that say draw 2, or cards like Flow of Knowledge and Flow of Ideas, which say draw for each island you control, which in a deck with 29 islands is pretty good. And just generally good draw spells. Some of them are interesting, like Tragic Lesson, draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless you return a land you control to its owner's hand, so you can return a land to your hand, instead of discarding, putting more cards in your hand, and then putting that land back with Patron of the Moon. You get what I'm saying? Some of these literally are just in here because they're budget, like Of One Mind will never be online. If you don't know, if you have a human and non-human on board, it costs 2 less to cast. We have no humans in this goddamn deck. But we don't care. It's 3 mana, draw 2, and it's cheaper than any other draw spell, so we're putting it in. Another thing to keep in mind when upgrading that is exactly because there are a ton of cards in here who literally will never come up, but they're just in here because they're cheap. But that's drawing. I then want to actually go over land bouncing, which is one of our main things, where is also most of our Moonfolk are. Surprisingly, a lot of Moonfolk like bouncing. This is stuff like Floodbringer. You pay 2, return a land you control to your hand, tap target land. That's not very good. But then you have stuff like Conduit the Mindful, which is a 3-mana 5/5 flying indestructible. It does have a can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in your hand, but you can also pay 3 and a blue to draw a card, then return a land you control to its owner's hand. Make it so that it can hit and it can get off, but that's mostly due to put lands back in our hand to put them in, as well as he draws. He's amazing. The Clouded Mirror is also very good. He's 5 mana for a 2/4, but he's a flyer, and also you could pay 1, return a land you control to the hand, create a 1/1 blue creature token with flying. Pay 1 to return a land, pay 1 to put it back. Pay 1, and as long as you have mana, you can keep doing that. You can return a tapped land, by the way. Even though the land does come in tapped after you put it back in, you can tap a land for mana, return that land to him, then put it back on tap. So you're getting the same amount of mana out of this. It's just you're putting a bunch of 1/1s onto the board. It is really good for this deck. And it's only 99 cents. So, you know, you could actually just build him because he's a legendary creature too. That's something to keep in mind. It's just, I won't go over all of them like I've said, but some of them are literally in here just for giggles and shits. And also because they're moonfolk that bounce land and they're not very good. Like, for example, Soratami Seer. 4. Return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand. Cool. Discard your entire hand, then draw that many cards. What? I don't want to just wheel myself after returning the lands. I want to fucking draw. However, if I understand it correctly, you should be able to chain the effect to put lands into play. I'm not sure, the stack's a little weird in this game. If not, then it's just a 5-cost moonfolk we can get rid of. There's also my favorite, I think the most powerful one in here, is Wonderscape Sage, which, tap it, return a land you control to its owner's hand, draw a card, then discard a card, unless that card had a non-basic land type. So normally this will just draw and discard after putting a land in your hand, but sometimes it won't. Also, it's a tap ability, so only once per turn, but it doesn't spend any mana, so good trade-off there. There's also some moonfolk that are just kind of here because they're moonfolk and they were cheap. Like, 35 cents for both of these is really good, or 4 to 9 cents depending on where you get them. Replication Specialist will never come up. He copies artifacts, I guess. Like, there's a slim chance that gets you some extra ramp or something, but, like, he's not good. Like, exceedingly bad in this deck. Cyber Cryptomancer is decent. He allows you to give something hexproof, which is actually really fucking good, but it's just not really that great, especially since it's 2 cost, so it doesn't help with your commander that much. You already have to have your commander out to get it. It's just bad. I should also go over our lands next, because this is another big thing. Arid Archway does nothing. It can just bounce a land, which is good. By the way, bounce lands in mono blue are so fucking hard to come by. Thankfully, they're not expensive. Conduit Pylons is a desert that comes into the battlefield and surveils 1, which is good. Also a non-basic land type. Coral Atoll, non-basic land type. And also, it can return an island you control to your hand. And it taps for a colorless and a blue, which is really good. Crystal Grotto is... Crystal Grotto enters at Scry's 1. That's pretty good, I guess. Desert of the Mindful is just in here because we can cycle it. And also it's a desert, which will come up later. Gallifrey Council Chamber, when it comes in Surveil 1. Guideless, bounces a land. Halimar Depths is actually interesting. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. It's kind of like scrying, but you can't put anything on the bottom. That's not bad, though. Myriad Landscape just allows you to ramp up to get your commander out easier, I should say. Pit of Offerings just fucks graveyard decks in the ass. Radiant Fountain gives you 2 life every time it enters the battlefield. And Sun-Scorched Desert is our win condition. When it enters the battlefield, deal 1 damage to target player. This is how we win. We use our big boys to hit him for damage, and then we finish him off with Sun-Scorched Desert. It is beautiful, I tell ya. However, to get to it, it's a little difficult because it's a desert, so it's a non-basic land. And the only good piece of blue ramp being a weird 3-mana creature that says discard a land, or discard a card, sacrifice a land, get 2 lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. There's a problem with that, and the fact that this is not a basic land that requires basic lands, And the only thing that we can get in mono blue is these two guys. It's not a lot, but it gives us 2 extra chances to get Sun-Scorched Desert, which, with the amount of draw we have, is very possible. Expedition map, specifically, you can pay 2, tap, sacrifice it, search your library for any land card, put it to your hand in the shuffle. One of the more expensive cards in this deck at $4, but it's very worth it. We then have Silver Deputy, which is only 35 cents, but when it enters the battlefield, you can get a basic land card or a desert card, then shuffle your library and put it on top. Also, it can give a target creature +1/+0 until end of turn for tapping itself, which is like, who cares? I guess it allows us to hit in for 6 damage instead of 5. Ooh! It is commander damage, though, so that's actually not bad. I should stop shitting. But seriously, this is like, these 2 are our only ways to get to this, which, to be fair, we could just hit them with the big boys if it doesn't work. It's not a big deal, but it is still annoying to deal with. We then, of course, have ramp with Arcane Signet, Mind Stone, which allows us to draw a card, nice benefit. Omen Hawker, you could pay, you pay 1 to summon enemies with 1/1 that can tap for a colorless and a blue. You spend it only to activate abilities, which Patron the Moon is an ability, so you get 2 activations off just this guy alone. Silver Mirror, cost 2, comes in, tap it for 1 blue, real cool. Soul Ring, pays 1, or you pay 1, it can add 2, very cool. Thought Vessel, pay 2, can add 1, but it makes it show you have no maximum hand size, kinda worth it. Tiller Engine, oh my fucking god, Tiller Engine. 350, but super helpful. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control tapped, which is what Patron of the Moon puts them in as tapped, you can then either untap that land or tap target non-land permanent an opponent controls. So either tap down an opponent to finish them off, or make Patron of the Moon pay 1, get 2 mana. Pay 1, get 2 mana. Pay 1, get 2 mana. It's insane. Wayfarer's Bauble is Wayfarer's Bauble. It's also 35 cents, so that's pretty good. Now that we've got the normal shit out the way, we of course have the removal and counter spells. I won't really go over these, just there's nothing really that interesting here except like this, which pay 2 blue, return 2 land, islands you control to your hand, return target creature to an owner's hand. It's pretty good. That's also not sorcery speed, by the way, that is instant speed, which is very good. However, now I want to go over the spice. The stuff that definitely should not be in a deck this cheap, but it's cheap, so we're gonna put it in. It also will get you kicked out of the Plague group. Starting off, fucking Mana Breach. $2.80, whenever a player plays a spell, that player returns a land he or she controls to its owner's hand. See, with Patron of the Moon, we don't give a fuck about this. We'll just pay an extra mana and put that bitch home. But this costs 3 mana. It makes it so your opponents, for every spell, have to constantly keep returning lands to their hand that they then have to play. So if they want to play optimally, there's a time where they're just not going to be casting spells unless they're, like, ramping the entire time. They just won't be casting spells at some points because they need to bring their mana up instead of bringing it down. Which is, yeah, kind of important for you. We then have Sunder, which is even funnier. It's $2.50. Return all lands to owner's hands. See, for us, we could give less of a shit. We just don't play a land the turn we get this. Play it, return all lands, play 1 land, get 2 tapped, and we'll probably have to get rid of a bunch, but so will our opponents. This is funny as hell, and it's stupid. However, these aren't win cons, these are just meant to slow your opponents down to stop them from beating your win cons, which are, of course, the big men. We have Breaker of Armies, which is a 10-8 for 8 that says all creatures that are able to block him must block him. 79 cents, pretty good. We also have Inkwell Leviathan. It is Island Walk and Trample on a 7/11 and Shroud, so your opponent can't even do anything against it except -X spells. We then have Kendrick Leviathan, which is more a backup card. When it enters the battlefield under our control, we return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Every single one of them. Against artifact players, be damned, your ramp is gone, pussy boy. However, it also has Unearth, which is one less than its actual cost, meaning for the amount of, like, there's a lot of cards in this deck that discard, coincidentally, so we could actually get it out for cheaper at a later time. And it also makes people not want to mess with us as much, because we actually have a lot of different ways to bounce, especially in our removal that you'll see if you go into the goddamn description and check out the deck. Please! Please! We also have Kraken of the Straits. Creatures with power less than the number of islands you control can't block Kraken of the Straits, which is a 6/6 for 7 that can become unblockable, which is pretty fucking good, I'd say. We then have Myojin of Cryptic Dreams. He costs 8. He's only a 3/3, but we can remove the... It comes on with an indestructible encounter, but we can remove that indestructible counter to create 3 copies of a permanent we control. What you think about 3 fucking copies of a permanent we control? By the way, I'm definitely building a deck based off of this shit. This is the next deck I'm building. It's gonna be another blue commander. I know, it's fucking stupid. But come on, man! That's awesome! Awesome! I just had to figure out a way to put command zone creatures into my hand, but I'll figure it out, you know I will! On a serious note, we then have Scourge of Fleets, which is just a good card in general. Don't know why it's 50 cents. But when it enters the battlefield, return each creature an opponent controls with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. So you could just return pretty much everything else on the field. It's only opponents, by the way. It's not you. It's your opponents. So you'll be clear to hit them in the face. We also have Stormtide Leviathan, which is Island Walk. All lands are islands in addition to their other types, and creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. This might fuck with us a little bit, but I think an 8-drop that stops our opponents from hitting us or anyone else at all is a really good bargaining tool, as well as it also allows our commander to also hit, meaning commander damage is now a very feasible way to kill a motherfucker. The last one we have costs 7 mana, it's a 7/7. It is quite possibly the best card in this entire fucking deck. For only $1, it's a 7/7. I already said that. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Untap it. It gains hexproof until end of turn. So you attack with it. Then you return a land you control. Untap it. It gains hexproof. I mean, you can also do that on your opponent's turn if you really need to, but still, just stopping people from interacting with the bastard. And even if, like, they just do a removal spell while it's still untapped, you can still do that. It just won't untap itself because it's already untapped. But also, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, so it has landfall, target creature on opponent controls attacks during its controller's next combat phase of Fable. They can attack you, but it forces your opponent to attack maybe with their mana dorks, maybe with their creature-based ramp. It can fuck with your opponent if they're trying to rebuild up their +1/+1 commander. You could force them to go hit and attack, even though they definitely aren't strong enough to hit anyone on the board. It's great. It's amazing. And it returns lands to our hand, meaning Patron of the Moon could just put those bitches right back on the board for you. It's amazing. Now, I want to be clear, this deck is not perfect. It definitely has problems. It has problems winning games. But if you want a cheap deck, about $60, that also it can be upgraded and is fun to play, and I've confirmed this, it is fun to play, then I would definitely suggest just picking this up and upgrading it as you get the money. And I know some people are in the comments going to be saying, of course, like, why would you include this when there's this? 1, budget deck. I have to go with the shitty options sometimes because I don't have any other choice. And 2, I don't know every card in Magic the Gathering. There might be some mistakes I make, might be some stuff I miss. Instead of being an asshole about it, just comment, hey, there's also this card, guys. It's a really cool add to this type of deck. Just do that. Instead of being told you're a piece of shit, you'll be called a good guy for advising people on better deck construction. And I think that's really good. Just word your advice like you're not a fucking asshole and no one will be mad at you about it. No, this is not me talking about past people I've had to deal with. What are you on about? On a serious note, though, thank you so much for watching. Again, The deck list is in the description. Go check it out. Go check out my other video on all the Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh stuff I've done, and I hope to see y'all later. Goodbye.
I don't get what I want, I get what I need. Every single day I'm heading off to my dream, and I get everything that I damn well please. I don't give a damn if you all listening to me, cause I run it. I'm the only one that really want it. I'm the only one that's really on it. I'm just being honest. I'm just doing everything I promise, cause I want it bad enough that I'ma make it as an artist.